welcome to another episode of the CPGGUYS podcast. Our hosts, Sri Rajgopalan, Peter V.S. Bond, and Brian Gildenberg explore how brands and retailers engage consumers in an increasingly digitally driven world. And now, here are the CPGGUYS. Hey everyone, welcome to the CPGGUYS podcast. I'm PVSB when I'm not co-hosting this podcast along with my BFF Sri and my other partner Brian. I help enterprise brands improve their SEO and SEM, that's search engine optimization and search engine marketing, that helps them grow their e-commerce business. Along for today on our conversation is my fellow co-founder of this little cottage industry we call the CPGGUYS. Please listen to his elder daughter, Ria Raj, and her music at riaraj.com and follow his younger daughter, Laura, on her journey to become one of the newest K-pop stars in the Global Dream Academy competition. In fact, by the time this episode airs, we'll know the answer about did she make the band. So let me welcome my podcasting ride or die sidekick. He's the man known as Sri. Hey, Sri, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, Peter. I want to talk about Laura being in the band, but I really don't know because we're 8 days away. But at the time this episode's released, we will know. So I wish I said something. So I'm going to say congratulations to her in advance. We are 8 days away, but the voting process this fifth time around was very intense. So we'll see how things go.
She was right up there at the top of the list. So let's.
I'm number 2 on the third mission. So.
There you go. I don't want to jinx things, but I'm cautiously optimistic too, Sri. And I haven't seen you. It's been like a month or so. I'm kind of miss you, man. It's like I like being around you. But anyhow, we got to get together in some short order before the end of the year. But thanks for joining me in today's conversation. Before we get to our guest, I'll remind everyone, please subscribe to our podcast, The CPGGUYS, on your favorite platform, and particularly if you use Apple or Spotify. I can't stress this enough, people. Just take the time, hit pause, wait until I'm finished speaking, and then you can hit pause. But after I'm done speaking, hit pause, go into Apple or Spotify to our podcast, scroll down to where they have the rating and review section, and give us a rating. We love the number 5, but it's up to you. But doing so really helps feed the algorithm that makes our podcast more findable, more discoverable. And while you're there, also write a review because we want to know, are we talking about things that are of interest to you? Make sure that our content is relevant to the audience that finds us interesting, educational, entertaining, whatever. And make sure also to check out our sister podcast. There's Brian Gildenberg's CPGGUYS Fast Forward. There's CPG Scoop with Risa and Jennifer. And, of course, the FMCG guys are colleagues over in Europe who are giving more of a European flavor to fast-moving consumer goods. And, of course, Sri, Brian, and I are very, very honored to be formal sponsors of Next Up, whose mission it is to advance all women in business and promote the cause of gender equality in the workplace. We've had several Next Up members appeared on this podcast in November during Women's Month, members of the board, along with Sri in particular, and we are so honored to be part of that organization. Links to our podcast, our sister cast, our landing page on Next Up. Just toggle up, 90+% of you are listening on your mobile device. Just toggle over to the liner notes of this episode and click the hyperlink. You don't have to write any of this down. It's all in there, including links to Ria's music as well. So it's all in there. All right, so let's get to our guest. I met him at Grocery Shop back in 2018. I think that was the first year Grocery Shop was in operation. It was an offshoot of Shop Talk. I was working at Power Reviews, and he was a client of ours working at Constellation Brands, prominent manufacturer of adult beverages, where he spent 5 years working in omnichannel retail sales and category leadership. Prior to that, he was at Anheuser-Busch InBev for over 8 years in various sales and category management roles. Earlier this year, he joined an adult beverages challenger brand called Flying Embers, which manufactures hard kombucha, hard seltzer, and canned ready-to-drink cocktails, where he serves as vice president of sales, focused on all national, regional, and chain accounts, third-party marketplaces. He's also involved in B2B strategy and all omni-channel retail activities across the total U.S. Please join me in welcoming to the podcast my friend Ben Galvin. Ben, hey, how are you? Welcome.
Hey, guys, thanks for having me today. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to being here and having a Great conversation with you guys as we talk a little bit about challenger brands, as well as, of course, continue to add more beverage alcohol CPG people to your podcast.
Thank you, Ben. We love to do exactly that. It's such a fascinating niche within the consumer packaged goods world, which comes with its own constraints, restrictions, challenges, but also opportunities. So it's great to have you here. Hey, before we get to the question Sri and I have prepared for us, why don't you give us an overview of Flying Embers? What's kind of the origin story behind this rather fascinating brand name and how it's come to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were founded by a group led by Bill Moses, who founded Kavita, a non-alcoholic kombucha. And in 2017, the Thomas fires really threatened the Ventura County in Southern California area. And from that, if you think about the wildfires, the flying embers that come off of a wildfire really inspired him to come up with a hard kombucha brand that gives back to the community. So he's established a nonprofit arm, the Embers Foundation, which addresses firefighters, first responders, and community needs nationwide. And 1% of our annual revenue goes back to benefit first responders. We have partners such as the California Fire Foundation, as well as a number of other fire and first responding companies. But as you mentioned, we are a family of brands, hard kombucha, hard seltzer, and fermented cocktails. The focus has really been around hard kombucha across the industry. We really rode the wave in 2019 and 20 of the growth of hard kombucha, adapted to consumer trends as hard seltzer then took off in 2021 and early 22. And now flavored malt cocktails seem to continue to see the growth, as well as a lot of the consumer interest, full flavored, but higher ABV, such as a margarita. You recently had the Tropicana CEO, Monica, on your podcast, and she talked a lot about the different products that they have with real fruit juice. Well, that's a point of differentiation that we have here at Flying Embers. All of our products are made with real fruit juice. We're all certified organic. We're gluten-free. We're vegan, keto. All of our products only have 1 gram of sugar, 1 carb, and we have higher ABV. Our margaritas have 10% ABV. The unique component of how Bill and the founders built Flying Embers as well is in our USDA organic facility in Southern California, we have a largely reduced carbon footprint, as well as 98% of our packaging materials are produced within about 400 miles of our facility. So we really have that kind of better for you alcohol brand, if you will, and really have led towards us having this higher ABV as well as higher quality products that we can offer the consumer.
Thank you. That's such an interesting story, Ben. I can't wait to dig in a little bit more. But for our audience, if you toggle over the digital liner notes of the episode, we're going to include links to Ben's LinkedIn profile, Flying Embers LinkedIn page, and of course, the website for listeners to learn more and find out where they can try out these interesting products that meet all of the criteria. It's great that you have a cause associated with the origin story, and there's a measure of sustainability that you're really putting into reducing the carbon footprint that your company produces as part of the manufacturing process. So, Ben, let's kick off and start where we usually start when we have new guests on the podcast, because I detailed a lot of the background you had from big companies you worked at. I'd love to hear from you. What were some of those pivotal roles in your career that helped you develop the skills that you're drawing upon to lead national account sales at Flying Embers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of us, you guys have had great careers, but I think everyone looks at their career as a spider web today. It's not a ladder anymore. And I've always taken the analogy of in any role that you have, you either build something, fix something, or steward something. You're doing one or the other. And I think you laid it out nicely. I've had some very pivotal points in my career. And I go back to my national account and category leadership roles at Anheuser-Busch, where I've been able to learn under such great leaders running accounts like Circle K or Safeway for the country. But it really helped me to develop my skill set with influential nationwide retailers. As I worked at Founders Brewing Company for a short couple years after that, it helped me to learn and develop new market introduction as we introduced and launched about 20 states and grew about 67% during those periods. And then, as you mentioned earlier, my previous role at Constellation Brands, 2 former guests on your podcast, Wayne Dwan and Sarah Master, I worked alongside and for Wayne But we were really the pioneers of that e-commerce and omni-channel department. And that's one of those pivotal jobs that I believe I point to, that I learned so much about retail and execution and wholesaler management in Anheuser-Busch. It really set me up for success with my role at Constellation, because I could take those e-commerce and omni-channel opportunities and help the organization at Constellation in particular build some new muscles around learning growth, whether it's making sure that organizationally everyone can speak where the omni-channel business is going, but then also understanding to teach to the retailers as well. And now, obviously, moving here to Flying Embers has been another pivot in my career, and I think a really inflection point, because it helps me to build some new muscles, learning about growth, VC-based brands that I've never had the opportunity to do, and it helps sharpen my skills around process and team structure. It's that whole idea and concept of leaders don't lead by example; they set the example and hold everyone accountable to the standard. And I think that's the big thing that I've been able to accomplish, is these kind of build roles, in my analogy of build, fix, steward. And though you fix and build and steward things in different ways, I've really been likened to those things that you can build. And I enjoy that component about any job that I've had.
Welcome to the podcast, Ben. It's a pleasure to have you. And as Peter mentioned right up front, we do get curious about how the alcohol-based industry is shaping up, especially as it comes to an omni-channel world. So we're happy to have another such discussion. I like the framework of build, fix, steward a lot. So keeping that as a backdrop, what can you share with us about the role of challenger growth brands within this industry? Because these challenger growth brands, and you're not the first, like you said, who come to the show to talk about challenger growth brands in this space, with that build, fix, steward mentality, because there's no one better at doing that than challenger growth brands.
Yeah, absolutely, Sri. I think you have to have that kind of undaunting faith where you can pitch your tent, you dig in, and you just believe. I think it's just so important. And I think about, a lot of the challenger brands that have helped define and set trends for consumers. I mean, you look at what the DTC business did in non-alcoholic beverage over the last 5 years, but then you ultimately see, as a challenger brand, you realize you don't have the mind share with retailers, distributors, even industry leaders. It takes time to build that engagement. And I think that role of challenger brand within the beverage alcohol category is really the innovators. And they ultimately can start to set a lot of the trends and be a little bit more nimble. I also like to liken it to, it's a brand that can build champions who will advocate for your brand when you're not there. We continue to invest in engagement with distributors, consumer insights, a lot of those things, and they ultimately can then help surround and improve what the consumer experiences around flavor profile or the packaging innovation or just ingredients as a whole. And I think it's ultimately encouraging that the beverage alcohol industry has so many challenger brands, whether it's across beer or wine or spirits, because it ultimately continues to encourage consumers to find that treasure hunt of that new product. They may have their old reliable beer, wine, or cocktail that they go to, but now they can have the treasure hunt to find something new. And that's what brings excitement to an industry like the alcohol industry.
Yeah, I loved what you said about leveraging insights around driving innovation. You came from big companies that invested very heavily in data and insights resources. You're now at a challenger brand. And so sourcing that kind of information and being scrappy about it, I've got to imagine is somewhat challenging. I love the fact that companies like the Drizzly Marketplace actually publish really valuable insights that help challenger brands in particular, much like mom and pop retailers, understand where there are opportunities, where there's innovation, and it really can help guide some of your activities. I'm kind of curious, before I get to my next question, how you think about sourcing insights for driving your activities.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, we obviously don't have the consumer insights departments that other companies do. So we do have to be scrappy. I think one of the great things about the alcohol industry is it's a very tight community. And to your point about Drizzly, we've seen the same thing with Instacart, even some of our retailers, but also our peers in the industry. Yes, we're not going to, divulge private and proprietary information, but it's been very encouraging to see challenger brands and smaller brands share with other brands insights that ultimately encourages everyone to grow. It's that whole analogy of a rising tide lifts all ships. And so I think one of the big things in being a challenger brand is that we can be scrappy with what we're looking for, but we have to be very direct with what we're looking for as well. We can't take time looking at consumer demographics that maybe don't fit our loyal and core consumer. So we can be very prescriptive of exactly what we're looking for and go after that information and then act on it. It's not always the rocket science, of course, but it's that whole idea, Peter, to your point exactly, of we need to be a little bit scrappy to find exactly that core insight we're looking for and then run with it.
So let me follow up a little bit on what Sheree said around the role of a challenger brand. More specifically, help us and our audience understand what is the importance of portfolio and flavor style evolution that's stemming from challenger brands and that role within retail. Like, what's new? What's kind of last year? Why are challenger brands better positioned to, I think you described innovate as a core capability, but I'd really like you to dig into that a little more.
Yeah, I mean, it's what's the new news. That's what everybody wants to find, and that's what everybody wants to see. You know, alcohol is such an emotional connection to so many people. We're not going to be the brands that keep the distributor or the retailer's lights on, if you will, but we will be those exciting treasure hunt types of brands that make something grow. And that's where I think the mental awareness and product availability of new to world or new to market brands, it really builds on the brand's health and credibility to build momentum for evolution. Take a perfect example of what you're seeing in the hard seltzer space as some of those brands move into higher ABV, lower carbonation. Again, the brands still have a large base of loyal consumers, but they're innovating in different ways. And I think you can see the same thing with challenger brands. Brands that ultimately continue to ride the wave where they see fit. But it's really important that they are that influential as well as incremental purchase that retailers depend on from a profitability standpoint, because a lot of us from a brand standpoint are more profitable than some of the bigger brands. We don't have the elasticity or non-elasticity that the consumer expects when it comes to price. So they're willing to pay a little bit more, especially if the ingredients are there. And that profitability is a very important component when you talk about smaller brands because of the trial and error component, but it's also the important component of building a basket that's more profitable. And we all know retailers are looking for that today.
Ben, that lack of elasticity, no elasticity, however we wish to define it, has got to be a huge advantage, I got to imagine, for you and for Flying Embers, especially in that test and trial mode. And is that giving you the ability to kind of reinvest in innovation?
Yeah, it certainly is, Sri. You're exactly right. It's given us the affordability, but the right to ultimately continue to innovate. It also, because of the high quality of ingredients that we put into our products, and again, matching price with some of the main competitors, we don't price ourselves above the Trulies or Mike's or Cayman Jack. We're priced right alongside with them, despite our higher quality of ingredients and higher ABV. But it does give us the ability to innovate a little more agile, as well as listen to the retailers on what they want to see within their market. So we see that as a huge advantage going forward, especially with when it comes to innovation and package innovation like single serve.
So I got to imagine some of the packaging innovation, single serve, that's a direct outcome of focusing on consumer preference and how it's changed over COVID. You know, I think we all know that the alcohol, beverage, spirits category is trending much higher than it ever did in this COVID and post-COVID environment. And then how do you personally and how does Flying Embers discover new alcoholic beverages so y'all can also learn from? So it's a two-part question, right? I'll repeat it. The first one is, how has consumer preferences changed now? And the second part is, how are you and Flying Embers learning to keep pace?
Yeah, consumer preferences have changed a lot. I mean, you think about during COVID was the influx of the millennials and Gen Z being the largest LDA consumer base, where the baby boomers, again, continued to get older. So from an LDA consumer standpoint, we're a generation that grew up with Kool-Aid and High C. So we're looking for flavor in everything that we drink. And I think the flock to familiarity hasn't changed, but focusing on those consumer preferences is something that is so important. And that sense of curiosity and flavor exploration has been something that everyone's looking for while still promoting a healthy lifestyle. With regards to the how and where the Flying Embers is looking for consumers to discover new products, we're ultimately being a nationwide distributed brand. We're looking at the role of a lot of different components, but most importantly, the role of digital, whether it's, again, through the omni-channel retail space of the Krogers and the Walmarts of the world, the third-party marketplaces like Instacart and Drizzly, but also the importance of paid digital, paid social as well as organic to drive digitally influenced sales and the whole tried and true on shelf space. Just like everything, the consumer may do their research on their mobile phone, but they'll still walk into the stores. And the how and the where you can discover new products is really happening in that environment. So it's important to make sure you're continually utilizing your digital footprint to influence the consumer, even though they may go in to walk into stores. And that's where the role and the power of digital influence sales come from.
And so I know we're going to talk to you about retail media later, so I'll wait for that question. But however, I do want to ask you about content. Peter and I have always believed to the day, the product detail page and the quality of the content just has some outcome on the SEO, but more importantly on how the consumer tends to buy product. How does Flying Embers focus on content? And then do you guys have an ecosystem and a mechanism for as you create new innovation, you tend to prioritize content?
Yeah, it's a great point. And a lot of challenger brands don't always focus on that. We've been very fortunate to have some leaders in our organization that have been very forward when it comes to quality as well as content management. We have just rebranded a lot of our packaging and a lot of our content over the last 6 months that will be rolling out this fall and into next year. And so we've prioritized that due to some of the leaders in our organization around making sure the content is there, but then also ensuring that think of it as the architecture or the infrastructure is set up to be able to get the content out there. We recently signed an agreement with Salsify to stand up our own PIM, but then we also have a wonderful in-house team of very creative and talented individuals that can create not just organic content, but then ultimately systematic content that we can take out to retailers as well. And that includes what we can put on the PDP that completely mirrors what we're putting in our paid or organic social. But I'm here with you 100%, Sri. I don't think enough brands focus on content because though it does help with SEO, it really helps with the consumer perception of what that brand represents, even though it may be a platform like Instagram where you can't even buy beverage alcohol because of the laws. But those influences are still real.
Hey, Ben, you threw out a couple of acronyms. I want to make sure we bring our audience along. We already talked about SEO and SEM at the beginning, and you mentioned the PDP, the product detail page, but you also used the term PIM in referencing Salsify. You want to describe to our audience what a PIM is?
Sure. So it's really important to think about as an organization that you really want to make sure that you're having the opportunity to stand up certain things with an organization that can connect to a retailer. So a PIM is a product information management. Think of it as a tool that helps manage data required for marketing and sale of your brands to retailers. And so it gives us the ability to structurally take our content from our marketing team and get it to retailers like in a PDP.
Yeah. Perfect. That is exactly what I wanted to make sure our audience understood. Every retailer has its own particular nuances to what they like on the page, and Salsify is going to help you make sure that your content is right for retailer A and the content is right for retailer B and retailer C. So that's really good.
Right. And the value that comes in the alcohol industry is we can't pay for a lot because of the Tied House laws. The restrictions on alcohol to pay for things with retailers. But because content like this is free and not seen as a thing of value, it's a very powerful tool that we can ultimately give to the retailers for nothing.
I want to remind our audience that today Sri and I are speaking with Ben Galvin. He's the VP of Sales for National Accounts at Flying Embers. So let's dig in a little bit more. We talked about and made reference to the fact that retail media is a big issue and these Tied House laws. So we were going to get to retail media. We're here now. Ben, you handle a lot of big national accounts. So I'm thinking of accounts like Kroger, like Albertsons Safeway, like Walmart, like Total Wine, all of which have fairly robust and active retail media platforms, but also the three-tiered system and Tied House laws that are in place in the U.S. restrict your ability to do things directly with retailers. So I'd love to hear from you how you navigate the investment against retail, given all these restrictions that the government laws are in place and prevent you from doing things like a PepsiCo or a Coca-Cola would do.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly continued to be a volatile and ever-moving space for the beverage alcohol category. 2023 was a volatile year for e-commerce as a whole, and all of the suppliers, including the small brands such as us, are really seeing a lot of changes. So the way that we have to continue to evolve our experience and as well as investment when it comes to whether it's retail media, but is also ensuring where we're seeing the greatest growth against the challenging opportunities that we have. You mentioned a lot of the major retailers like Kroger and Walmart and so forth, and some of them are starting to stand up their own kind of retail media that's for alcohol brand, DSP types of platforms, demand supply planning component. And so it gives us the ability to explore some of those, but they're on very, very limited space. So the dollars that you look to spend are very unique. The other thing that's a component with regards to beverage alcohols, you also have the business to business side of it. So that's like Provi that is out there where we can invest. And again, the audience in those environments isn't the consumer, but the retailer. So then those are business to business solutions that give us the ability to market our brands to retailers that purchase, mostly independents. And then, of course, the marketplaces. And that's where a lot of the alcohol brands invest today, the Instacarts, the Drizzlies, the Ubers, if you will, because, again, they don't own liquor licenses. So it's legal for us to purchase products from them. Think of them as the Kayak of the grocery world. So Kayak, the travel, Kayak doesn't care if you stay at a Marriott or you fly Southwest. They just want you to buy on Kayak. Instacart's the same way. They have obviously such a food court of grocery retailers, and that gives us the ability to influence and have some solutions there. But I think the biggest thing that alcohol brands have to navigate when it comes to retail media is how are your dollars being spent and what's the ROAS or return on ad spend that you're seeing against your most important clients. Again, whether you're investing in Walmart or Kroger, it doesn't matter as long as you have a great partnership with them and deep distribution density. But if you're a smaller brand like us that maybe doesn't have the density across one or two of those retailers, the marketplaces make a lot more sense because it's a little bit more retailer agnostic. And so we can go into many other retailers as well as the power of search within the platform itself.
So Ben, thanks for that. I completely understand that working with the tight house laws is not easy on the online stuff, and retail media being more and more omniprevalent. You like that, Peter? Omniprevalent these days. I want to double down a little bit on retail media, right? So retail media has offsite, onsite, banner ads, SEM, which is really search at the end of the day. I want to focus a little bit more on the search side of things. To me, retail media gives a brand the ability to stay top of mind. And top of mind equal to brand equity at the end of the day. I'd love to hear from you how you feel about that. And then is Flying Embers, the Instacart example you gave, are you following up on that? Are you investing in retail media? And Instacart is just one example. Could be any platform that you're distributing via. And are you primarily leveraging retail media for the purpose of findability?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the big advantages that a lot of brands such as our size and our scale and scope is a lot of retail media gives us the ability to get deeper with our reach and our findability. I say a lot of challenger brands have that mental awareness problem as well as product availability. And with that, us at Flying Embers and a lot of our peers are really leaning into the search component of our products because we realize that the loyal consumers of Flying Embers, for instance, are already searching our name. Every supplier wants you to search the name because your SEO or component of that is the most valuable. But how do you look at the category terms like hard kombucha or cocktails or margarita and then maximize from there? So that's where, for instance, Flying Embers is really leaning in to make sure we can capture not just those sales, but the awareness of us as a product within those categories. And at the end of the day, Shri, every dollar counts and is measured in our world. So one of the things that we are constantly looking at and what gives us the widest reach with the highest possibility of purchase. That is key when it comes to the dollars spent, especially in a VC-backed brand like us. And we're very focused on concise and focused SKUs to maximize the input of our brand funnel. We want to be as low in that marketing or purchase funnel as possible with every dollar we spend. And we're really diligent on our SKU count as well to make sure we're focusing the consumer into the right SKUs that we know will drive the highest velocity and potentially the highest lifetime value.
So Ben, last question on retail media. How are the tactics that you're trying to employ around retail media woven into overall trade marketing and budgeting for, I guess, for not only for Flying Embers, but generally speaking for alcohol beverage brands, regardless of size? Sure love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, it's important. And you think about the CPG world or the beverage world, the world has certainly changed with regards to the acumen and skill sets that we all need. I really believe that we live in a world where all leaders need to have an omni-channel aptitude and skill set. Nobody has to be an expert, but we need to have that foundational understanding of the important criteria like digital content, ratings and reviews, retail media, and everything around it. But the basic of that foundation is traditional marketing, messaging tactics that can bring that static message, whether it's in digital or in the store, that you can kind of drive conversions to it. And again, not everyone is going to have the same budgets. Not everyone's going to have the same initiatives, but economics, just the dollars and cents, continue to be reviewed because it's so imperative how you manage that budget. And you mentioned the word trade marketing. Peter, trade marketing means a lot of things these days. And it's not just what point of sale you put in the store. Trade marketing can also mean how you're coming to market digitally. It really is one budget anymore. And then how you then use those dollars in store, online, and in other different funnel tactics. So the world has certainly changed, but because the consumers had us and made all of us brands move that way.
You're 100% right. In at the end of the day, trade marketing, things have to come together at the end of the day, because whether it's I would say a trade spend dollar or marketing dollar, consumer dollar, or a promotional dollar, at the end of the day, they're going into the same consumer's household at the end of the day, and you're trying to acquire more households into your brands at the end of the day. I know Peter promised that would be the last question on retail media, but I wasn't done yet, so I hope it's okay. I am curious whether with the environment of Tight House, doing offsite media and retail media networks is even an option in the first place.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, unfortunately, it's not. Or with a lot of suppliers, doing offsite media really can drive towards more of a marketplace of landing. Again, when you think about offsite media for our world, we can't drive to Amazon or Walmart directly from a lot of the media that we put in. Again, whether it's a billboard with a QR code, a commercial with a QR code, or something digitally. So in a lot of instances, you'll see then a landing page that's curated by the brand that offers you solutions based on your zip code or your geo-targeting where you are. And then from that, you can, of course, can pick your retailer and check out. So in a lot of instances, there's a little bit more friction or one more step that a lot of that offsite media, unfortunately, has to drive. But I would say over the last 3 or 4 years, a lot of brands have really shortened that funnel to purchase and made it as quick and as easy as possible to be able to check out with an alcohol product from offsite media. It just creates a little bit more friction, if you will, with some of those kind of, if you will, gates that we have to put up that allow for not giving a thing of value to a retailer, which is ultimately what Tight House Laws is.
And then I'm also curious to learn, as and when you put retail media investments in with a given distributor or a delivery agent, are you also simultaneously working the in-store mechanism at the same time to truly get into the lower funnel activation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the retailers themselves, a lot of them have done this better than some of the brands have the last few years, making sure that the consumer knows that when they're in store, hey, next time get it delivered. You don't need to come into the store. But yes, a lot of brands have really brought that omni-channel messaging to consumers, bringing more awareness to the delivery or click and collect component of that. And even brands of our size, we're going to be rolling out some media as well as some imaging next year using QR codes and some messaging, allowing the consumer to find our products in other ways. Again, if they're in the store, great. Our product's right there. They can utilize the shelf talker or the in-store point of sale. But guess what? You can get it delivered as well. And we don't want to ever take sales away from our retailer partners, but it gives the consumer a choice to purchase it in other ways. Because as we all know, we purchase multiple channels a week. And in some instances, we can't always go to the store. So we want to make sure Flying Embers is at top of mind, whether they're shopping in store or online. And a lot of brands such as our size can be nimble in making sure that messaging is out there because, again, we need to make sure there's mental awareness for our product always. And we want to make sure that the consumer, when they can find it, can purchase it.
Keeping all that in mind, the world is obviously very different from what it was 3 years ago, where omni-channel is now the way of the world and the consumer. You just talked about that. And I'm surprised to hear in a pleasant way that even retailers are putting it in front of the consumer when they're in store that, hey, delivery is an option for you. But if you look into the future, what recommendations would you give challenger brands? What are you focused on? Flying Embers focused on, next couple of years, that kind of thing to win as you look forward to a new year?
Yeah, I think the first thing is really resiliency and flexibility. They're muscles that you build. Whatever you believe today needs to have enough elasticity to maneuver in the future. I think that's one of the most important things that challenger brands need to think of and continue to work on. The next one is be a storyteller. Simple as that. Make sure that you have a story, what data focused, of course, making sure that you're true to your story, but being a storyteller is so, so important. And then third, and most importantly in today's world, especially as the consumers look for brands, is be authentic. Be authentic and maintain that personal touch in everything that you do. Authenticity in your brand messaging, your liquid, as well as everything that you're doing is just so important as more and more consumers want to engage with brands in different ways. So I think being authentic is really a key one.
Wow, that was terrific. I want to remind our audience to visit cpgguys.com. You can find all of our content. And of course, if you think you or your company would love to contribute some thought leadership to this community discussion we have several times a week, why don't you drop us an email at contact@cpgguys.com. Maybe you can join us on a future episode of this podcast. And of course, while you're there, don't forget to drop us a rating. It's on the navigation bar at the top. And of course, Sri and I and Brian all want to thank our 26,000 plus followers for trusting us to both educate and entertain you as we talk about this industry we so very much love. Inside the digital liner notes of this episode, you're going to be able to find a link to Ben Galvin's LinkedIn page, Flying Embers LinkedIn page, and of course their website where you can learn how to procure some of their tasty beverages. Sheree and I are both teetotalers, Brian too, but I have it on very good authority that this is some great tasting product. So Ben, thanks so much for taking time out of your Friday. We always love to record these episodes going into the weekend, but thanks for taking time before the weekend to sit down and speak with us about your new venture. We're really happy for you and excited for what Flying Embers is going to bring to the industry going forward. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I just want to also thank both of you because I really think that, and commend you both, because you use your CPG Guys platform, your personal platforms to promote and build a community. That's what being a challenger brands means. And it's all about lifting others and building a stronger community. And I truly believe that's what the purpose of what the CPG Guys universe is. And I just wanted to commend you for that because I think it's certainly spectacular.
Thank you, Ben. Hey, Sri, we're a challenger brand. What do you know? Who knew? This is awesome.
That's funny. You're trying to be funny today, just like I did with the omnipresent. Well done. Well done.
Funny, ha. But Sri, thanks. Let me turn to you because I know there were some really great nuggets that Ben shared with us today. Why don't you share with our audience some of the things that really resonated with you?
First, I want to thank Ben for recognizing that we are indeed building a community. That's very generous and kind of you to say that. Our mission here on the CPG Guys has always been education from day one. Peter and I have been lucky enough. We started with as hardcore in-store careers as life could have possibly had, working with data insights from day one. And then we were lucky enough that very early when the world was shifting to omnichannel, we got into the e-commerce world. So we want to make sure for those that didn't get that benefit, we're passing on all the education and knowledge as we can. Just as equal to us is gender equality, and that's why we are actual partners with Next Up, as you know. So let me summarize our learnings from what Ben had to share with us today. So right up front, when Ben said, look, we've got the Embers Fund, which is 1% going back to California first responders. That means a lot, and I think it actually separates challenger, startup. I don't like the word challenger brands anymore because once you're in distribution inside a store, even if you've got one facing, you're no longer a challenger because you worked your way into convincing a merchant that you belong. So congratulations on that. But it matters a lot that the 1% ecosystem has been set up to give back, and it's not on profit. If I heard you correctly, it's on annual revenue. Is that correct, Ben?
Yeah, 1% of our annual revenue goes to our nonprofit Embers Foundation that we set up. That's correct.
Most will do it on profit. And that's right up front. I knew this was going to be a fun topic. Then you mentioned two stats here. 1 gram of carb, 1 gram of sugar in an alcoholic beverage is a pretty hard benchmark to be at. I guess being a kombucha brand, that's doable. But then I start thinking about if you put alcohol to it, I think you mentioned 10%. Maintaining 1 gram of sugar cannot be easy. So congratulations on getting a formula to be able to do that. And then we started chatting about careers, spider webs, not ladders. And you yourself, the training you had of new market introductions and how important that is. And that's exactly why you're doing this for private equity now. As I mentioned, Peter and I had the luxury of being pioneers of e-com. Sounds like you two did. And a lot of that came from the omni-channel role and the ability to execute omni-channel at AB and Web and then Constellation Brands. You gave us the framework of build, fix, steward, which allows challenger brands to be innovators in the category and create that treasure hunt mentality, which brings excitement. And a lot of that is just like any large brand is also leverage on insights. It might be a common misconception to believe large brands have access to unlimited amounts of data and can do that, but small brands start right there with market analysis at the end of the day. Challenger brands also tend to be much more prescriptive. They focus on deploying an idea versus vanilla brands versus vanilla darts that a large brand might throw out into the marketplace. But you also talked about how you're not as challenged by elasticity or you're benefiting from a lack of elasticity, which drives a lot of trials. And, it's of course your job after you get the trial to make sure there's a repeat. And to some extent, consumer preferences that have been shaped over COVID are helping. You pointed out the Gen X one, that they've actually come into this category in a big way because they like flavors. You mentioned the Kool-Aid generation. I found that funny, but in a strange way, as funny as it is, that does make sense. And the sense for curiosity and flavor exploration now actually exists. And prior to moving to alcohol-free world, I did move to cocktails exclusively from wine. And that was coming from the curiosity of flavor exploration. And then we started looking at the role of digital. I asked you about content and the importance, and you mentioned that you're fortunate to have senior leadership that actually believes in the private equity and the house company, Flying Embers itself. And that the best way that is actually demonstrated is you have an in-house creative team that works on it. And we talked about PIM, which I was not expecting quite at length, including you explained clearly what a PIM means, Product Information Management System from Salsify. Peter and I have spent a fair share of time working on PIMs in our life. Then we jumped into the important piece of tight house laws and how you are learning and how Flying Embers 2 is evolving from the evolving tight house laws, which are not set in stone and never change. Lastly, we got into retail media for quite a bit. Important awareness driving vehicle for you, but for alcohol, bev in general. But one of the advantages or one of the focus areas you have by being deeply engaged on outcomes as opposed to just upper funnel is your very lower funnel focus, and you measure the word that I love to hear from brands that I rarely do, LTV or long-term value of the consumer. High velocity is good, but if you don't get repeat, it's useless, but y'all are focused on both. And then we asked you about in-store, and you did mention how nowadays in the alcohol bev category, even in-store, the use of QR codes, etc., started to get more prevalent, and consumers are now being made aware that, hey, you have a choice to get this delivered if you want. Lastly, we asked you for advice for other brands, for those listening in, marketers, and you talked about building muscles of resiliency is the number one important virtue. I would say that anything in life, I can't agree more, that if you can't be resilient and patient, don't engage. And then you use the word storyteller, but storyteller with a data focus, and maintain your authenticity and a personal touch. Those statements you made could be good career advice for anybody, I'd argue, not just for the alcohol bev sector. That's a wrap.
Thank you, Sri, for that summary. I thought you did a great job. And again, Ben, thanks for joining us. To our audience, we're greatly appreciative, as I mentioned earlier, that you trust us to educate and entertain you. We'll talk to you on the next episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Goodbye. The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter.
Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPGGUYS LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPGGUYS LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPGGUYS LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.